King St. Stephen and the founding of the Christian state of Hungary. The 20th of August marks St. Stephen's Day, the most prominent national annual holiday for Hungarians. However, in August 1945, at the end of the Second World War, there was little room for celebration in war-torn Budapest. Just as the German occupation ended, the Soviet occupation would begin. People were busy mourning their dead or carting their possessions through the rubble in search of food and shelter. Despite this, parish priest Béla Witz, guard of the Holy Rite, continued preparing for the forthcoming celebrations. Until 1944, the Holy Rite, King Stephen's naturally mummified right hand, was carried through the streets around Buda Castle as part of the annual St. Stephen's Day procession. These processions were attended by heads of city and state, alongside large crowds who, irrespective of religion, gathered from Budapest and across the country to celebrate. However, during the 1944 siege of Budapest, the Holy Rite was moved to Austria for safekeeping. After the war, Béla Witz requested its return from the American military authorities then in charge of Austria's western zone. The return of the Holy Rite required papal permission, which miraculously arrived within a day. A group of American officers, led by the Hungarian-born Lieutenant Colonel George Kovac, covered hundreds of miles, traveling tirelessly through alpine snowstorms to obtain the treasury keys from the Archbishop of Salzburg. With the Holy Rite in their possession, they arrived in Budapest just in time on the eve of August the 19th. The city, though in ruins, could at last celebrate. More than 100,000 people took part in the procession the next day, with carpets and flowers adorning windows and houses decorated with the national flag. The celebration instilled a sense of hope and optimism, and people began to believe that Hungary could rise up once again. According to opinion polls, 1,000 years on, King St. Stephen remains the country's most popular historical figure. The Hungarian Order of St. Stephen is the highest of state honors. The largest church in Budapest is the basilica which bears his name, and the most famous Hungarian rock opera is also about the monarch. Almost every Hungarian Catholic church has a figure of the royal saint, and there are public statues of him in all major Hungarian towns beyond the borders of present-day Hungary, as well as in Toledo, Ohio, in the US, where a statue of the king stands next to the parish church of St. Stephen. What is it that has ensured the popularity of Hungary's first king for so long? Which deeds are those that, after 1,000 years, still stand the test of time? What is it that the nation can be most thankful for? Almost every Hungarian knows the answer. The country is still standing. It has survived. Military campaigns. Following the Hungarian conquest, the Magyars continued their raids, plundering for spoils of war. They launched 47 attacks over the span of 70 years, mainly towards the Byzantine Empire and westwards. From early spring to autumn, thousands of Hungarian warriors ravaged various parts of Europe, reaching the Danish border in the north, crossing the Pyrenees after devastating Italy, and eventually arriving at the shores of the Atlantic. Their success was mainly due to their skilled use of mounted archery tactics, as the Byzantine Emperor Leo the Wise noted in his work Tactica. They are armed with swords, body armors, bows, and lances. They use one or the other as need requires, but when pursued, they use their bows to great advantage. Apart from their battle line, they maintain an additional force that they send out to ambush their careless adversaries. They prefer battles fought at long range, ambushes, encircling their adversaries, simulated withdrawals, and wheeling about. The Hungarians left a trail of destruction in their wake, sparing neither soldier nor civilian. They looted monasteries and took prisoners for ransom. Hungarians became so greatly feared that they were mentioned in Italian prayers. "Lord, protect us from the arrows of the Magyars." Despite countless victories, the Hungarians were finally defeated near Augsburg, Germany in 955 by the army of the German king Otto I. It was a turning point that led Hungarian leaders to contemplate the future of their nation. Géza, Grand Prince of the Hungarians. In 973, Hungarian envoys arrived at the Imperial Assembly in Quedlinburg to meet with the Holy Roman Emperor Otto. They were sent by the new Grand Prince Géza, Apat's great-grandson, to requisition missionaries from the emperor. Géza, who had been baptized the year before, was determined to convert Hungarians to Christianity. He recognized that Hungarians, sandwiched between both Slavic and Germanic peoples, would only survive if they reconciled and integrated with Christian Europe. To achieve this goal, he put in a request that priests come from abroad, and was willing to use force to spread the Christian faith among his people. Géza was a Christian for purely political reasons. On one occasion, one of the prelates was informed that, besides the one true God, the Grand Prince was making sacrifices to pagan gods too. On reproaching Géza for this, the Grand Prince replied, "I am rich and powerful enough to do so." Grand Prince Géza, however, ruled only a part of Transdanubia and the highlands in the north. To extend his power base, he married Sorold, who was the daughter of Gyula, Transylvania's ruler. The Grand Princess behaved like a female warrior. She rode, drank like a man, and even killed people in fits of rage. In the final years of Géza's reign, Sorold ruled the country. They bore several children, the most famous being Vaik, who was baptized with the name Stephen. Struggle for power. One of the oldest equestrian statues of medieval Europe can be found in Bamberg Cathedral in Bavaria, Germany. The statue depicts a young crowned saint on horseback who has just entered the church and, awed by its grandeur, forgets to dismount. Local folklore states that the strange statue represents the aforementioned young King Stephen, who was in Bavaria when his father asked the Duke of Bavaria, the future Holy Roman Emperor Henry II, for his daughter Gisela's hand in marriage on his behalf in 995. The Hungarian Grand Prince's high-ranking marriage and imperial in-laws cemented his status and recognition in Europe. The wedding was held in Germany, and the young couple arrived in Hungary with a large entourage of German priests and knights. A few months later, Géza died, leaving Stephen to carry on his father's work. In contrast to Géza, Stephen was a devout Christian, and his faith gave him the strength to fulfill his father's policies. Firstly, however, he would have to seize power. In accordance with ancient steppe tradition, one of his distant relatives, Kopány, an elder from Almos's clan, wished to marry Géza's widow, and so lay claim to the throne himself. Kopány laid siege to Veszprém, where Sorold was then staying. However, Stephen was quick to act, and his army, reinforced with German knights, defeated him, and he was killed in battle. Stephen had his body quartered and publicly displayed in 4 castles of the country as a warning to show how rebels were punished. The birth of the Hungarian kingdom. Stephen's power gradually extended to cover the entire country. Although a pagan custom, the Turul legend recognized he and his ancestors' legitimacy to rule. He was dissatisfied with this. He wished for universal recognition of his divine right to rule as given by the grace of God, and wanted to be a king. At this time, the Pope, the Holy Roman Emperor, and the Byzantine Emperor had the power to crown him. Stephen, however, did not wish to become the vassal to a secular ruler, and sent his envoy, Bishop Austria, to Pope Sylvester II in Rome. The Pope had already ordered an ornate crown to be made for the Polish Grand Prince, but before bestowing the crown, an emissary of God was said to have appeared to him in a dream and said, "Know that tomorrow there will come envoys from an unknown nation who will demand a royal crown from you and the gift of an apostolic blessing to their prince. Do not hesitate, therefore, to give the crown which you have had made to their prince. Know that he deserves the crown and the glorious royal title for the worthiness of his life." In fact, this story is inaccurate. Austria was not the envoy of an unknown nation, and the learned Pope Sylvester knew who had sent the envoy. Stephen's crown from Rome is not identical to the famous Holy Crown of the Hungarians. The only item from the medieval Hungarian coronation regalia that can be directly associated with King Stephen is the coronation robe. This garment, featuring intricate goldwork, was made by Queen Géza for the Basilica of Székesfehérvár and later became an accessory in other coronation ceremonies. The robe bears the only authentic image of Stephen. He was crowned king at Christmas in the year 1000. Thus, the Christian state, the Kingdom of Hungary, was born on the first day of the new millennium. But more than an illustrious title was necessary to ensure its survival. The country had to be transformed in its entirety. The consolidation of Christianity. During the Middle Ages, kings were considered sacred. They were chosen by divine grace and had to combine the charisma of a priest, a magistrate, and a ruler. King Stephen, the founder of Christian Hungary, fulfilled each of these vocations. To remove the control of German archbishoprics in Hungary, Stephen created 8 bishoprics with the Archbishopric of Esztergom as their head. He oversaw the construction of cathedrals, including the prominent one in Esztergom, as well as one of Europe's largest and most beautiful churches, the Basilica of the Assumption of Our Lady in Székesfehérvár, which he transformed into a sacred place for royalty. With one exception, all of his successors for the next 500 years were crowned here. It was also the burial place of King Stephen and 14 other kings. Additionally, he also established several monasteries and granted a charter of privileges for the Benedictine monks settled by Géza on St. Martin's Hill, providing idyllic conditions for the Benedictine Abbey of Pannonhalma. The abbey still stands today, serving Hungarian culture 1,000 years on. Monks continue to live and teach there in accordance with the Benedictine motto, Ora et labora, pray and work. St. Stephen's laws provided the foundation of the Hungarian state and spread Christianity throughout the land. He ordered the payment of church tithes. Every 10th village had to construct a church, and Sunday Mass was mandatory. Those who broke fasting rules were confined in dark cells, whilst those who were unruly during Mass were punished with haircuts and floggings. While such methods may not have been the most effective means of conversion, the spiritual power of Christianity, the biblical tales, and the solemn rituals of the Church made their way into the hearts and minds of the Hungarian people. After Stephen's death, pagan rebellions erupted, and many continued their pagan practices. However, within a few decades, Hungary would become a Christian nation. The organization of the state and legislation. The Christian state could not function within the framework of a former tribal clan. Following the European model, King Stephen introduced territorial administration. He established counties, which still stand today, and appointed county commissioners, known as Ishban, to head them. Despite land donations to church institutions and the armed forces given in exchange for support, royal estates remained dominant and provided local resources. The king's seat was in Esztergom, but he travelled the country with his entourage throughout the year to enjoy both the fruits of his royal estates as well as to use his presence to thwart any attempt at rebellion. The king held court yearly in Székesfehérvár on the 15th of August, on the Feast of the Assumption. Many of the country's secular and church dignitaries and ordinary people flocked to town to have their legal disputes resolved by the king himself. However, in addition to tradition and customary law, written laws were also necessary. King Stephen left behind 2 codes of law that aimed to protect and consolidate private property and prevent violence and arbitrary acts. Homicide by misadventure was punished by 12 gold coins and strict fasting, voluntary murder by 110 coins. But the law also stipulated that all who take the sword will perish by the sword. The punishment for oath-breakers was the loss of a hand, which could be redeemed by 50 steers or 12 steers in the case of a commoner. The Kingdom of Mary. A key issue for King Stephen was finding a successor to consolidate his reforms after his death. He had 2 sons, one of whom, Otto, died prematurely, but he had high hopes for Prince Emmerich. He dedicated his literary work on good government, Admonitions, to Emmerich. But as fate would have it, the prince died in a hunting accident. Therefore, King Stephen was left without an heir in the final years of his life, and there was the risk of losing everything he had achieved. By law and custom, his cousin Vasul and his sons were the heirs to the throne. We do not know if Vasul was a Christian, but Stephen doubted his cousin would continue his work. Therefore, he decided to make his sister's son, Peter Orseolo of Venice, his heir instead. Many disapproved of the decision. One evening, after the king retired, an assassin secretly entered his bedchamber, a sword concealed beneath his cloak. The sound of the weapon striking a stone awoke the king, who confronted the intruder. The assassin confessed, fell to his knees and begged for mercy. The identity of the conspirators was not recorded, but Stephen had Vasul arrested and blinded, and his sons were exiled or fled to escape punishment. Little did Stephen know that Vasul's sons would carry on his legacy. By all accounts, King Stephen was a profoundly religious man. When the future of his country was at stake, he turned to the Almighty for aid. When he felt his death approaching, on the 15th of August 1038, on the Feast of the Assumption, he summoned his dignitaries and prelates and entrusted Hungary to the protection of the Virgin Mary. From then on, the Virgin became Hungary's patron saint, and the country was regarded as Regnum Marianum, or the Kingdom of Mary. The king's body was interred in a marble tomb in the basilica at Székesfehérvár. His canonization, bestowed for his merits in converting Hungarians to Christianity, took place 45 years later. King Stephen's life work had a significant impact on the destiny of Hungary for over 1,000 years. He was an accomplished military leader who never lost a battle. He thwarted rebellions and repelled the German imperial armies that attempted to invade Hungary in 1030. His efforts are the main reason why Hungarians still live in Central Eastern Europe today. They avoided being assimilated into other cultures, survived as a people, and escaped the fate of their predecessors, including the Huns and the Avars. Hungary was successfully integrated into Christian Europe without losing its independence and sovereignty.